The Utah Story Show is brought to you in part by Utah State, home of the Aggies. So living on campus means more sleep, more friends, and better grades because you are not commuting. While others are driving or walking on campus, you're getting those precious extra minutes of sleep. Instead of going home to your mom or your cat, you're hanging out with roommates, neighbors, and friends. So 84% of USU students live away from home, making on-campus housing a community of academic support, peer mentors, friends, and constant activities. For a virtual tour, room details, theme options, and to apply, visit usu.edu/housing. The Utah Stories program is brought to you in part by Curry Pizza. Curry Pizza is awesome. We've been having it at the office. They've been serving Indian food for over 10 years. They opened their first location in a small town called Bicknell. It's a tiny town in southern Utah. And they were serving curry on a pizza because they had to get curry and their whole idea of these sauces into the hands of these small town people. So he said, well, I'll make a pizza shop. And it's just an incredible place. It's owned by a guy named Binda, and he was recently featured on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and he opened a second location in West Valley, Utah. I highly suggest you check it out. It's amazing pizza. The show's also brought to you by Paizlee's grass-fed beef. Premium all-natural grass-fed beef delivered right to your door, free anywhere in the state of Utah. It's an awesome new company, and we love their jerky and their steaks, and everything they do is awesome. Visit Paizlees.com. That is Paizlees.com. Paizlee's grass-fed beef, always the right choice. The Utah Story Show is brought to you in part by Legends Pub and Grill. It's locally owned and operated and serving up all your classic favorites and unique originals too. They have amazing burgers, which I absolutely love. Their food is made with real, wholesome, delicious ingredients, awesome appetizers, main dishes like steaks, sandwiches, salads, pizzas, calzones, and now they've got a very special new options for gluten-free and vegetarian folks. Finish off your meal with mouth-watering desserts, plus they have a full bar which offers all sorts of local craft beers. I love their talented bartenders, their tasty creations, and check them out for an upcoming Utah Jazz game or U of U game. It gets rowdy in there, but it's an awesome environment to go check out a game. They recommend you call ahead and reserve space for your group, and they accommodate all ages. They now have 2 locations. Your downtown Salt Lake City location is at 677 South, 200 West, and their new Southtown location is at 10631 South, Holiday Park Drive in Sandy, Utah. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Utah Stories program. My name is Rich Markosian. On the program today, a very exciting guest and show. We've got Benjaman Stuman from Paizlee's Grass-Fed Beef, and we're going to be talking about rural economic development and agriculture in Utah. 2 big topics, and Benjaman's got some interesting insight. He's a guy who runs a business all on his own called Paizlee's Grass-Fed Beef. We'll, of course, be talking about the grass-fed beef movement, pasture-raised beef movement. And before I get to that, I have a couple of items I got to mention. We've booked the dates for our upcoming Made in Utah Winterfest. Those dates are the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd weekends of December. And if you are familiar with our Winterfest, it's basically a huge party celebrating the best of local Utah. We are really careful about who we invite in terms of the bands and the vendors, and we're really always actively seeking the very best product makers in all of Utah. And so if you have some ideas of vendors that absolutely should be there, we always want to know who they are. We want to vet their products. And it's going to be amazing. We've got already some amazing bands booked. We know that there's going to be craft cocktails available. There's going to be beer and breweries, and it's like this out of the Utah body experience because you can walk around with your kids, you can enjoy your family, you can drink a beer, you can listen to a band, and you can shop local Utah, the best local Utah products. And yeah, and it just gets bigger and bigger every time we do it. And this year, Gateway has really stepped up. They really wanted to partner with us and make it bigger than ever. And so we're doing it 3 weekends, the first, second, and third weekend of December. And go visit madeinutahfest.com for more information on that, madeinutahfest.com. Also, I want to welcome all of our new subscribers to our YouTube channel. It was kind of amazing. We've picked up 280 new subscribers, and just wanted to do a shout out to you guys because I know it's kind of interesting looking at our stats on YouTube. It's 2 videos I produced 2 years ago that brought in a ton of traffic, and I don't know what Google or YouTube's algorithm was doing, because they're Ben Shapiro protest videos where I went out to the campus of the University of Utah and interviewed these protesters, and they were protesting Ben Shapiro because he was a white supremacist and a racist, and he's an Orthodox Jew. And I really wanted to get into understanding the hearts and minds of the protesters. And so I made a couple of videos about it that have gotten hundreds of thousands of views. And it's kind of surprising. And a lot of you have become subscribers due to those. So I'm happy to have you here, but we won't be doing a lot of Ben Shapiro. But what we will be doing is a lot of digging in deeper into the important issues that affect Utah and our quality of life here. And we like to really try to understand how things operate in Utah, why they operate, and really get into the heart of the matters and understand Utah and how we preserve our quality of life here, and how we preserve the quality of our free market economy and capitalism here in Utah. And mostly that has to do with keeping the government out of places like rural Utah and allowing people to go and be able to create their own wealth and be more self-reliant. And so we're all about those values here on this program. And I can't say that I'm a part of the Republican Party, but I'm definitely conservative and borderline libertarian. So if those values appeal to you, then continue to subscribe to our channel and enjoy it. And if they don't, then I'm sure you can find another channel that supports your values. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Benjaman. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and one more quick announcement. Utah now has the 5.0 beer law. We went to the grocery store. We bought some beer. It's now allowed to have 5% alcohol by volume at the grocery store. And the Budweiser Clydesdales came to Ogden and Salt Lake to celebrate the fact. So cheers to beers in Utah, and we're going to enjoy this wonderful Keto's Brewing Rimondo Pale Ale. It's got a goat on it and a big hop. I'm not exactly sure what this is going to taste like, but help yourself, Benjamin.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just so happy that no longer will we be the no longer will we be the 3.2 state in Utah. And one to Tyler.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Let me open this up so I can. Oh, this is a different kind of can. The whole lid pops off.
Whole lid pops off.
Wow,
It's like the
that's
classic
awesome.
can back in the day.
That's crazy. I've never had a can of beer like this. So,
Cool.
Did you come straight from what's the town you live in again?
Torrey?
Torrey,
Middle
yeah.
of nowhere, and then you make a left. Yeah, I came from Torrey this morning. I was up on the Henry Mountains all weekend hunting buffalo.
Oh yeah, you told me about that. How was that?
That was a blast.
Did you get a buffalo?
One of the hunters we were with got a buffalo opening morning. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Got another hunter out there that's still plugging away.
So do you guys divide that up and enjoy it?
Yeah, so we just help them out for this one. And so basically, we help them get places, get set up, and then once they get one, take care of it and get it off the mountain.
Is that part of your ranch and the business end at all?
It has nothing to do with that at all. Like to have it be part of the business end in the future at some point, but there's a lot of hoops through the DNR you got to jump through to be able to monetize those types of things and whatnot. So
because you have to have all these special permits to be able to go in there.
You have to get special permits, and you have to make sure that you're registered with the DNR or DWR, whichever term they want to go by this year, to be able to guide people. They want to make sure that you're not going to get somebody into the backcountry and then get them killed, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend actually, who's lives in Teesdale, he told me he's trying to start a tour guiding company too. And
Really?
yeah, they created a website and everything, and they want to be able to guide people on hunting trips, on backpacking trips, and
Yeah.
maybe eventually down rivers and things like that.
Great. Well, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'll share some of the pictures with you, but beautiful scenery. You're on top of the world out there, and you have the East Desert and Lake Powell and everything around you. It's just gorgeous.
So you actually took a few days off, huh?
I did. That's the first time since it's the first weekend I'd been home since May.
Yeah.
So otherwise, it's been on the road all the time.
Yeah, I gotta say, as far as like millennials go, I mean, we've worked with a lot of millennials. Tyler's one of the awesome millennials we work with, and everybody on staff now I can say is great. But millennials, they have this tendency to not want to work hard, to feel kind of entitled, to not want to just like realize to make something succeed, you really have to work your ass off. Why is it that you're kind of an exception to that rule?
Well, first of all, I will say I would have agreed with every statement you'd made until about 2 years ago. And that is, in my opinion, it's not just millennials that don't want to work now. It's the workforce that doesn't want to work now.
Mm.
Because hiring employees, no matter the age group they're in, the quality of work ethic is just down, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I blame a lot of it on cell phones and electronics. People are always more distracted now. They're never as engaged with what they're actually doing in the present as they possibly could be.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that across all the demographics. And so I am a big believer the millennials got the big hit for that. And there's a lot of other things culturally that are definitely specific to millennials that I don't jive with. But when it comes to work ethic, I mean, that was just the household I grew up in, right? I remember being a little kid with my dad in his office, and I said, I'm bored. And he goes, well, if you're bored, you're stupid. So, yeah, that was
If
it.
you're bored, you're stupid.
So I didn't want to be stupid. So I never am bored now.
Found something to do to not be bored.
I think I was about 3 years old at the time, and I drew a picture of a dinosaur, and I wrote, if you don't work hard, you'll go extinct. Right? I'm pretty sure he still has that somewhere.
Nice.
But, yeah.
And he didn't tell you to do that.
No.
You came up with that on your own?
Yep.
Nice.
And it's funny now. I'll go to events sometimes where I have to wear a suit, and I have a pair of cufflinks that are a T-Rex skull, right? I just love the ornate detail work to it. But people ask me why I wear those, and I said, and that's my answer, right? It's a reminder that you can become irrelevant like that. So
that is a key, man. I certainly know that from the first couple years of Utah Stories. It was like I realized we will go out of business if I'm not personally handing out thousands of copies of this magazine, because the advertisers are going to know that they're not getting out, and everybody else is going to know I'm doing it half-assed. So you got to go full bore, or you're just gonna not make it.
yeah, that's a fact.
Is that the biggest problem you find with business owners that you look at, that they just don't realize the work involved in getting off the ground?
Well, I think more than that is not just the work involved. It's more about people feel like they deserve X, Y, or Z, right? A lot of employees feel like they deserve to be able to go do certain things because they see the boss doing them or anything else. And therefore, if they can do it, why can't I? Well, the answer is you don't have as much risk in the game, right? I mean, you have an income, and you have your job quality and your reputation, but you don't have life savings in some cases, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. You don't have the responsibility of all your employees' well-being and their incomes on your shoulders. And I would imagine, some people probably don't look at it that way, but I certainly do. I've always felt like if I fail or screw up or do something that's going to affect my employees, I'm really in charge of their income. And therefore, I've got to take that with a little more of a more weight to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that if you're an employer and you don't understand your ability to make good decisions has a direct impact on all the livelihoods of all the people who are relying on the income you're providing them, then you got a short-sighted look at things.
Yep.
So you grew up in a house where you basically were told you got to be working hard, you got to work hard all the time. What did your dad do, or your mom and dad do, that was required them to work hard?
So both my parents went to and taught at the U and at Utah State. What exactly they taught, I'm not going to try and make it up here. They were both in the communications and debate departments, right? So they were very much into, understanding the whole arguments around things, working very hard. Both of them had PhDs, and dedicating themselves and just grinding stuff out, right? No matter how hard or easy it may be. So as a kid, I remember coming home a lot and entertaining myself because my mom was grading papers. My dad had opened his own business at that point and had started to phase himself out of teaching. You just learn to keep yourself engaged and always learning. I mean, I remember being in middle school or elementary school and wanting a Game Boy. My parents were like, "No, that stuff rots your brain," right? But like they meant it. They weren't going to ever let something like that go in the house.
Wow, really?
Oh yeah. So if it wasn't educational, it wasn't worth my time, according to them. So sometimes it sucked growing up, but at the end of the day, today, I mean, I'm happy about it. So.
And I find it kind of fascinating. You grew up in what, Salt Lake City, or?
No, I'm originally from Philadelphia. That's why I say things like water.
Water? So your parents became teachers in Utah.
Yep.
Later?
Nope. They became teachers in Utah early 80s.
Okay.
And my dad was from Philadelphia, and he moved back to take care of a family member that was going through a health crisis at the time. And so my mother followed him, obviously, and he went to teach at Temple University while starting his business. And my mother went to teach at a local university called Westchester University.
Okay. So you grew up in Philly.
Yep. I grew up in Philly, and then I spent my summers out here as a kid all the time, ever since I can remember.
Nice.
So from 3 on, I was out here every summer.
And was your goal always to move to rural Utah in Torrey?
I would argue that a lot of kids probably don't know that it's a goal, right?
Yeah. Most kids who live in rural areas want to get out.
I knew I wanted to be involved in things, right? I knew I wanted to just be out here because I like the environment a lot better. Mm-hmm. There's aspects of Philadelphia and the city life that I miss, but not a lot. I miss the food scene of Philadelphia. That was extremely engaging, still is today. Mm-hmm. And I miss the kind of sports culture, right? If you're not an Eagles fan, stuff like that. It sounds a little intimidating to people out here, but it was just always a camaraderie thing, right? Like, no matter what, if you were in any bar, you could high-five somebody and say, the Eagles just touched down, and know you're high-fiving an Eagles fan. It was just a fact.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But it was also kind of scary watching a Cowboys fan show up to the Eagles game at home. You felt bad for that guy. There's better ways to die. So
So you moved out to Torrey when you were how old?
I moved out the day I graduated high school.
Wow.
Yep. I spent that night in Illinois driving cross country.
And then you bought a restaurant.
So my family owns a restaurant, called Cafe Diablo. We first built a restaurant called the Saddlery, which was in Torrey as well. And then we sold that a couple of years ago. And now we purchased Cafe Diablo in 2012, and I've run that since 2013-ish. And been doing that since then. And then a couple of years ago, I decided I really wanted to get back into ag because I went to college originally for equine sciences at Utah State. I had found out really quickly that I had already done 18 years of college at home and didn't know it. Mm-hmm. So college wasn't my thing. I think my parents asked me how I was going to afford my mail when I told them I wasn't going to college anymore. And from there, I did a little bit of construction jobs and whatnot, and always wanted a reason to move back to Torrey. I was living in Salt Lake. Liked it, but it just wasn't my forte, really. So moved back there, and when we opened Saddlery in 2011, and went from there. So it was fun. It's been a roller coaster ride in the restaurant industry. More kind of I've always been grown up in pass or fail situations. Never like, oh, we're going to teach you this. It's like, figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. Sink or swim.
Yeah.
Right. If you sink, we're going to know we picked up the wrong kid from the hospital. Is what I would be told. So.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. And so, how did you get into the grass-fed beef business? How did you decide that you want to get into that business?
So I decided that I wanted to do something more towards ag. I like the restaurant industry and it's fun, but it's also not fun at the same time. It takes a lot out of you. Weekends are gone. All that kind of stuff is gone. So I wanted to find a way to get back into ag. One of my biggest frustrations, especially running a restaurant down in Torrey, is we only get 2 deliveries a week, and our closest grocery store with anything real in it is about an hour and a half away. So if something doesn't come in on our orders, I have to go get it. Otherwise, we're going to be out of it for 2 to 3 days, depending. And a lot of times what was coming in wrong was our meat products. And to go buy, a full tenderloin or something like that from the grocery store isn't always an option. You're seeing that more and more in high-quality restaurants or grocery stores like Harmon's, etc. Mm-hmm. But 3 years ago, you didn't really see that a lot. So one day our meats order came in wrong, and I just said, screw it, I'll do it myself, right? And I just started figuring it out. I started piecing it together. And piece by piece, worked on a name, worked on, what a branding strategy would be, logo creation, stuff like that, and just built it from there.
So you started by buying your own whole cow and just figuring out?
No, not at all. Not at all.
You just, so when the meat order was screwed up, your decision.
So when the meat order was screwed up, that was the thing that inspired me to really just go get into it.
To get into it.
Yep,
okay.
that inspired me to say, okay, how hard can it really be? Right? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be challenges. I know everything else, but we're not flying to the moon here.
Yeah.
So how hard can it really be to make your own beef company? How hard can it really be to market your own products? Mm-hmm. How competitive is it, and whatnot? Now, little did I know then that jerky was the second most competitive niche in grocery, second only to yogurt.
No kidding.
Right? Yeah, nationally. And the beef industry is certainly saturated across the board, but in my opinion, local farms or local beef companies or meat companies in general are what's going to be the future when you look at how educated the consumer is today, and what a crappy job the big beef companies do about educating them about agriculture and farming and ranching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. And the sales of pasture-raised beef, I think I heard, at least up until the last 3 years that I've been checking, double every single year for the last 3-4 years. It's still only about 4% of the market share or something like that. Is that right?
I'd have to check on the pasture-raised stuff. I'm not sure.
I think that was the last time I checked. And it seems like it's starting to gain this momentum similar to what we're drinking right now. And it's, craft beer.
That's an amazing industry.
Yeah, it is.
Talk about the millennials.
This industry here, when I started Utah Stories, it was completely launched thanks to craft beer. You went to Bohemian Squatters. They all backed the whole concept of Utah Stories magazine because we were going to write about this momentum and this buildup and this growth of craft beer, providing a superior product using a local workforce, decommoditizing craft beer. And so, my thinking was if we could decommoditize more products, if we could build and create more local economic vitality, imagine what could happen to more rural areas that are suffering so much.
Yep.
If people would just simply, in the big city areas, of course, it's not going to make a big difference if you buy it, whether, in your small towns, but if more people in Salt Lake City, Ogden, where there's the population centers, buy into this idea of shifting their spending to local, imagine what that could do for the rural areas supplying all these products that we buy.
Yep. Well, my answer to kind of what you just said is it goes hand in hand with some of the things that we've worked on too. Like, I'll be honest, I do not eat healthy in any way, shape, or form. Right? Hand me a Snickers bar, I'll eat it. McDonald's, gas station, hot dogs, you name it, because I live my life on the road pretty much. And anything fried in butter, of course, tastes twice as good. However, that being said,
You're a bachelor and you're in your 20s, right?
I'm a bachelor.
Yeah,
I'm in my
that's
20s, and
what
my
I did when I
metabolism
was in
just
my
decided
20s.
to stop, and my waistline decided to show up. But anyway, from there, I would be willing to eat a little healthier, but it's twice as expensive.
Yeah.
And why? For what reason? Just because they know their consumers are going to be more engaged to spend more money because they want to live that lifestyle on purpose.
Yeah.
So they're seeking out those items or brands that they know are going to be a healthier alternative. They care about the nutritional label on the back, right?
Yeah.
I never looked at a nutritional label until I started this company, right? Ever. I didn't care. But then again, I don't have allergies or anything like that either.
No, why would you? I mean,
if it has sugar, great. It's going to taste better. So at the end of the day, I wanted to be able to bring a grass-fed product that was not super premium priced, right? Because the biggest gripe about healthy food is it's too expensive. And a lot of the grass-fed beef companies out there are far more expensive than we are for individual cuts and whatnot. But that's just because I was willing to take a little lower margins on stuff to be able to appeal to a broader audience. And never with the intention of, okay, in 2 years we're going to raise our prices slowly. There's always going to be some small bumps and whatnot because of the market curve and what the trends are and whatnot, and supply and demand, and et cetera. But from there, we wanted to keep the pricing really static. So I tried to dedicate it.
You don't plan on ever raising your prices?
Not really, not unless the market dictates. I mean, if fuel all of a sudden jumps to $4 a gallon again, and feed prices go up, and the whole cattle market goes up, then of course I'm going to have to, because now the whole value of the animal has gone up along with the cost of production.
But as long as you can get the margin you're looking for.
As long as I can maintain the margin I'm looking for, and in the meat industry it is not a big margin, right? Then of course I want to be able to stay lower price than everybody else. I don't need to make $20 on one steak when I can only make 10 and still come out on top. And sell it for 20 or sell it for 10, not make 10. No one's making $10 on a steak.
It is about twice as much usually for grass-fed bite, right? Is that
usually? And that's what I see according to the USDA grass-fed report. Commodity beef is usually 50 to 70% lower than grass-fed based on the averages across the country. But once again, people are willing to pay those prices to knock yourself out. If you want to pay $9 a pound for a thing of ground beef, then that's fine. But I don't feel comfortable selling that to somebody.
When you don't raise your beef according to the feedlot model, the feedlot model is, if I remember correctly, the cattle are only on a pasture for 12 months, and then they're a feedlot for 2 or 3. Is that
so? The way that kind of stuff works is you have your cow-calf operations, who are basically a local rancher who runs a group of mother cows, right, who have calves every winter, and they'll sell those calves in the fall. Now, sometimes that depends on...
Sorry, Scams is barking.
They'll sometimes change when they calve out to sell it in the spring because they feel like they're beating the market or whatever. But the big trend is to sell your calves in the fall. And so from there, a lot of people buying those calves are going to be your feedlots, right? Your big people who own the feedlots or your kill plants. And so what they will do then is they will hold those animals for 3 to 4 months, sometimes longer, feed them up till they reach a slaughter weight, and then they'll ship them off to one of the big packers who usually buy them from there. And that's the way that whole model usually works.
So 3 months.
3 to 4 months, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. That's going to depend on genetics, individual breed of cattle, age of sale, right?
And then the feedlot for how long?
That's how long they would be at the feedlot.
Oh, the feedlot.
Right? They're going to be born in December to January through February, and they're going to be sold in September through October.
Okay.
Right. Sometimes beginning of November. So it's just going to depend on age and whatnot. You see a lot of the weights that go to sale for feedlots are going to be what they call 6 weights, 5 weights, so 500 to 600 pounds, right? Or usually what's sold on your semis that go to the feedlots or to the auction to go to the feedlots. So.
Yeah, and I as soon as I started learning about the factory farm model, I just started to think, okay, this is how 94% of our beef is produced in the United States. something like that. And it's the industry standard because the consumer is demanding a cheaper price. The consumer is saying, I don't care how this pound of ground beef was produced. I don't care what you fed the cow, how many steroids or antibiotics put in it. A pound of ground beef is a pound of ground beef. Who cares?
I would argue that most people would care. You can tell the difference between a pound of ground beef from Walmart.
No, yeah, but I'm just saying
else.
that was the typical beef production model. How do we get that pound of ground beef to be the lowest possible price so we can earn some margin on it?
Yep.
Because if you're selling it in Walmart, you got to sell it for what, $3 a pound?
But you got to understand, the cattle industry and the beef industry is controlled by 4 major packing houses, packing companies, right? Now, a packing company would be a company that buys the cattle from the feedlot. They're going ahead and they're killing them, packaging them, and selling them through their sub-brands, right? So Tyson, National Beef, etc. Okay? So, for instance, this week at our local auction house down in Salina called Producers, steers that went from 500 to 600 pounds, which is usually what people are going to want to buy because the steer is going to put on more weight than a heifer calf is going to go for $1.35 to $1.58 a pound, right? So a $500 animal at the average of 147 is going to be, $735. Now the feedlot's going to take that, and they're going to go ahead and keep them for 3 to 4 months, pump them up to, that 1,100 to 1,200 pound mark, and send them on their way. Now, a lot of your buyers, too, are just buying older cows and whatnot just for ground beef. Arby's does that. McDonald's has buyers that go around and just buy them for their feedlots. They keep them for 30 days, or sometimes they process them right away.
Canner cutter grade, right?
Canner cutter grade, right?
Yeah.
So when you also think about your levels of quality of meats according to USDA, you have select, choice, and prime. And that's based on marbling and fat layers in the ribeye and also different fat layers around the carcass, along with quantities of yield off the carcass, etc. But only 3% of all cattle killed in the United States every year grade as prime, which is what you're going to go get at a nice steakhouse, etc.
And they're deliberately raised to be prime, right?
Yeah. Yep. They're usually cared for a little longer, everything else. Now, most of everything that we slaughter, we found at about that 18 months of our having them are turning out to be prime, right? We're getting a couple choice animals in there, but that's also going to be due a lot to genetics. So that's the cool part, is being able to see what's it going to turn out to as well, right? And then eventually we're started to identify more looks and individual characteristics to notice, okay, these animals might be the same age, but this one's maybe its brisket is not dropping as much yet. You're not seeing as much fullness in the chest, right? Because the brisket's basically the pectoral muscle. And so we know we need to give this animal a little more time, or et cetera. And so we were really coming up with a visual guide to be able to determine that based on the grass-fed program that we do and everything else. So, and we also don't market ourselves as pasture-raised at all. We're just grass-fed. Most of the animals grow up, and live a majority of their lives out on the Boulder Mountain or Thousand Lake Mountain right there by us, depending on which local producer they're coming from. But once again, we're a grass-fed beef company that owns no cows at any given time. The whole goal for me was to create not only a better meats product, but also to create more economic prosperity in regards to agriculture in my community. In the county that I live, we have the highest unemployment rate in the state. We have a household median income of $36,000. I think the household rate for the whole state right now is 120-something, maybe higher.
Really?
Yeah. So, we're not up in the upper echelons right there. And you have a big group of people that want to keep agriculture there because that's the roots. And honestly, agriculture is my passion, right? But I'm also in the tourism business through my restaurants. There's a lot of people in my community that hate tourism because it's not ag, or because when they're driving their tractors, they get zipped around by a bunch of little small cars. And I don't blame them for that at all. But at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of connection of how do we use the funds from tourism to fund infrastructure for agriculture, and agriculture go ahead and creates the year-round income, while tourism is going to be seasonal. Because no matter what, Mother Winter is going to show up.
Yeah, and it's like tourism, the economic model based on tourism, as we see with Moab, you can easily become a victim of your own success.
Yes and no. I would argue, though, that Moab, I mean, Moab could have been managed a lot better. Now, hindsight is always 2020. Always. Never saying
And
anything
there's
different.
nothing wrong. I'm not dissing on Moab, but I know for a lot of the people who moved out there, they moved there because they wanted a quiet place.
Yeah,
and
but
they wanted to try to have a year-round economy and a year-round job and a year-round community. They didn't want to. So we wrote a headline: 300 tourists for every single resident in Moab this last season. And so it's just it's an enormous amount of tourism they're getting there now because of the success of the Mighty Five campaign. And so now
somebody should pat the state on the back for that campaign.
Yeah,
they obviously did well.
I mean, it was amazing, and I guess you shouldn't gripe about it, but I do have some problems with the way they've managed the success, the affordable housing.
But here's the
problem
flip.
there.
Here's the flip side to that coin. All of a sudden, a bunch of people get up in arms and go, "We hate the tourism. We hate the people here that come through because they're just a pain. There's traffic now. We have traffic lights, etc." Right? All of a sudden, they stop advertising, promoting. They raise higher taxes on tourism-based businesses, etc. Now the tourism-based businesses are going to go to another national park that's underdeveloped, like Bryce, that has more water. I don't think they'll ever come to Capitol Reef in a big way because we don't have the water hookups. We have too much BLM property surrounding it, right? And it's already starting to turn
Capitol
into...
Reef is so amazing.
Yeah, it's so amazing, but it's not as accessible. It's not as accessible as a lot of the other national parks, right?
Yeah.
Like Bryce Canyon, you can technically go see it from a car. Right, you jump out, you hike for 10 minutes, you go, all right, we saw this, you go to another pull-out point, you jump out, you go hike another 10 minutes, you're good, you can go in it, come out, it's easy. But at Capitol Reef, when you drive through it, or what you can do in a vehicle is not even 100th of the rest of that park.
It's amazing for
It's
backpacking.
absolutely stunning.
We did a couple of backpacking trips there.
But go back to Moab, once they do that, and those people stop coming in big ways, now you're going to take out your huge diversity of restaurants. You have a Thai fusion place in Moab. You have sushi. You have breakfast places. You have pizza places. You have 2 bars or 3 bars. You have a barbecue joint. You have a brewery. You have all that great stuff.
Yeah.
You take away that populace that's supporting all that seasonally, they're not going to stay there, or they're going to go out of business. And now the locals are going to go, oh my goodness, we wish we had this place back. Well, what could it have been? They just must not have been able to make it. Instead of going, well, we should have learned how to manage tourism better, make it so certain things were happening while not overpopulating this or that. Like, look at what Kanab's been doing lately. Kanab's always been a huge thoroughfare for people who want to go to the Grand Canyon. But they've done a great job of capitalizing it and really managing it over the last 6 years. They now have a couple of rated restaurants in the state down there. They have a lot of tourist attractions. They have, almost monthly events, even including through the winter. They've done a really nice job of doing that.
Yeah,
and they've made a nice job of making it, saying, okay, we want people to come for a day or 2, and we have the infrastructure to support that, and then they're going to go on their way. Because we understand there's nothing for them to just sit here at. They're going to want to keep going on to Grand Canyon or go on to Zion.
Yeah.
Look at Springdale. Springdale has no parking, no ability to expand parking, right, unless they go to the BLM areas outside. And they're constantly flooded with people. Right? And it costs $35 to drive through there.
Yeah.
Crazy. So what do? I think the answer would be whatever the town is outside of Springdale, at the base of the hill. The name is escaping me at the moment. That place should copy the Kanab model. And it kind of has. Let me look. I'm looking it up right now what it is. It kind of has.
Well, how I've seen this is... I always go through Helper, and we've written a lot of stories.
Laverkin's the town.
Yeah, so we've written a lot of stories about Helper, Utah, and Helper is still attached to the idea that coal is coming back. I don't see coal coming back. It's just not going to happen. So all of the out-of-work coal miners, it's about time they move on. But the city developers and the people I know who are business owners in Helper and Price, they, of course, love tourism. They want to have tourism. But at the same time, they want a year-round economy. They want to be able to have a legitimate source of jobs and revenue for the city that isn't tourism dependent, completely tourism dependent like Moab. And a lot of them look at Moab like it has become a victim of its own success, because not only are the jobs that are available, the tourism jobs, like the 10, 12, $13 an hour jobs, but they no longer have affordable housing at all. So the median, I interviewed a real estate agent in Moab, and really, if you want a 3-bedroom house now in Moab, you're looking at spending $500,000.
It's called supply and demand. It's how the economy works.
Yeah,
right.
But if the NIMBYs weren't in control of the city councils, they could open up tons of land and
Agreed.
create affordable housing by adding more supply to the equation.
I totally agree on that.
They don't want to do that.
Totally agree on that, right? And in time, something like that will most likely change, right? In time. And once people have identified whatever the barrier is, from other business owners or from other people who want to come in to help solve the problem of affordable housing, which is an issue across the whole state, not just there, then people will come in and they'll organize and strategize about how to do that, and they'll do it. There's a big difference between people who identify problems and complain about them and people who identify problems and then just do stuff.
You think that they could appeal to the state to come in and open up land?
The last thing I'm ever for is government overreach. Ever. I don't care whether it's the state or the feds. If the less they're involved in anything, the better off we all are, right? So
yeah, and I see that sentiment in every rural area I go to in Utah. It is extremely libertarian bent, and I can absolutely see why. Because if you live in a small town and around you there's a high per capita usage, I joked about it, but it's not a joke. There's a high per capita usage of abuse of oxycodone, all sorts of opioids, friends, family, opioid problems. There's people out of work in Wayne County. Like you said, it's a very low, medium household income. And it's basically a lot of despair and gloom, and to create a sense of that there's going to be a future. I think that the only hope is that people look to like Walmart opening up, and it's like, I think that a lot of people want to have industry come in, but my original point is that they don't want government intervention. The last thing they want is the government telling them you got to have all these regulations on what you want to do to try to make a product to earn a living. And the last thing that they want to have the government do is say the scariest 9 words anybody, business owners, ever heard is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And so, and I get that. And do you think that there's anything the government could do to help? I've had the economic development.
So I feel like there's two different points there, and let me attack the first one. Well, 3. First of all, when it comes to oxycodone, meth, and everything else like that, my answer is everybody needs a hobby, so knock yourself out. 2 is, when it comes to rural towns and communities and that feeling about despair, I argue you could go open a business tomorrow. You could drop a building from the sky, open a business, and it doesn't matter what you have. If the tone from the community is not positive and support, you won't make it. Mm-hmm. Forget if you're selling the thing that everybody needs. If the tone is not supportive, you won't make it, because no one will want to work there. A lot of people in small towns aren't hugely open-minded about that kind of stuff. And in my opinion, the reason is whenever you go to a small town, your demographic is mostly 50 plus, because most of the young people are moving away because they don't see opportunity there.
They want to get out.
Because they want to go see opportunity elsewhere. They want to go to where there's social life. They want to go where there's job opportunities. They want to go where that stuff already exists. I mean, you've got to be a special kind of stupid like me to go ahead and want to create those kind of opportunities, right? Now, it's a great thing because I care about that place, and I always will. But at the end of the day, you're always fighting an uphill battle, right? And you and I have had conversations before about stuff like this where it's kind of like, sometimes I wonder, like, why do it, right? Why not just go, nope, I'm going to go someplace else and do this, etc. And the answer at the end of the day is because I'm 28 and they're in their 60s, and I'll be around longer than they are, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully, in most of these small towns, there's a bunch of young people that are really just pushing and grinding away to try and keep their dreams or their ideas or visions alive. Because in time, that whole tone and feel towards small town America and in small town America is going to change. When the old generation goes out and the new generation's more involved in setting the tone, I think we're going to see a different rural America. And not in a bad way. Not in a like, ooh, this is recognizable. It doesn't feel rural anymore. But we're going to see a much more progressive rural America. We're going to see a rural America who's, utilizing every small tool, and technological advance to keep things going.
Yeah.
Just because the rate of change from generation to generation has never been more than it is today, ever.
Yeah. Well, look at the
Right.
ability to be able to telecommute now. I mean, how many jobs do you really need to be there anymore? I mean, why not? Why couldn't there be far more jobs where you're able to live in a place like Torrey or Boulder or Teasdale and telecommute every day and enjoy this wonderful rural environment where you can see the stars at night and breathe clean air?
Well, this goes back to the earlier argument where I say it's not just millennials that don't want to work. It's the workforce in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, how do you fix that issue? And how do you make it so people aren't so engaged on their cell phones, and more engaged, face to face? When I just went on this buffalo hunt, I mean, there's no service out there, so there's no reason to take your phone other than a camera, because I'm not going to go buy a digital camera when I would never going to carry it any other weekend but that one. But I was amazed at how quicker I fell asleep, how more mentally engaged I felt, just more in the present than wondering about what's going on, or I'm wondering about the analytics or the data of this, or wonder what's happening in the news. I didn't hear anything about the impeachment proceedings this weekend for the first time in a long time, right? All sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was extremely refreshing, almost to the point where I'm thinking about taking my iPhone 11 and trading it in for a flip phone, right?
Yeah.
Just because it would just be nicer.
We did the same
I'd rather
in Boulder,
spend the time and go ahead and pre-plan stuff that I have to do online or social media for my companies, and dedicate one day to it, than what you think is just an hour a day, which really turns into 3 hours of you checking, okay, how's this doing? How's that doing? Is it getting good response? Is it not getting good response? No matter what any of us say, we're all doing it.
Yeah.
Right? Anybody who tells you, oh, no, I never get back on a check is lying to you. Period. End of story.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. When we saw you, we visited your place and saw your ranch. It was like on our way to Boulder, and for 4 days we were off the grid in this ranch in Boulder, and it was the most refreshing thing ever, because all we had was books. There was no TV, and we'd wake up every day and see this amazing pasture, and this was Boulder Mountain Guest Ranch, and they're
beautiful
kudos
property
to them, because we did a trade deal with them. But yeah, just amazing. They've restored and done regenerative ecosystem by using beavers.
Mm-hmm.
But I see the pasture raised movement and the way they use the cattle, if they're managed properly. The guy who I know is sort of the man spearheading the pasture raised movement, Joel Salatin, talks about how you do intensive grazing in one particular paddock, and then you use electric fences to move those cattle to a different area, so that this original place they grazed has about anywhere from 2 to 3 to 6 months, depending on the grass and the health of the pasture they're raised on, to recover, and then they're dealing with larger, more healthy grasses or healthy pastures. And the whole idea is regenerative agriculture. Is that what your animals are mostly are you able to get animals that are raised in that fashion, or is that still a really tough buy-in for traditional cattle ranchers?
That's a really tough buy-in, and for a couple of reasons. One, in Utah, you can't just be a rancher. You have to be a rancher, farmer, mechanic. You've got to be everything under the sun that you really need in your back pocket. It's not like Wyoming, where you can go buy a pasture and it rains and the grass just grows, right? I mean, we have to pump water, deal with your overgrazing things, right? We got to look at what the watershed's going to look like for this year and the next year. What's the snowpack look like all the time? Because that's constantly affecting what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, and last
you
year
don't have
was
this
such
consistent, immaculate pasture,
right?
like they have that.
Listen, agriculture is a lot easier everywhere else but here, just because we're in such a remote and high elevation spot, especially down in southern Utah where we're at. So you got to really want to do it. You got to love it. And from there, too, the rotational grazing thing is great. And it's an awesome movement. I see it a lot in the videos that I watch about New Zealand and Australia and stuff like that. It looks like a lot of people do it down there. And it may have even been pioneered down there. But from that, too, that's a lot of labor. Mm-hmm. And for one guy who's managing mostly 200 and some cows, and then their calves every year, they don't have time to do that every day. And my goal was never to go out and create this perfect ecosystem, right, and utopia of beef creation. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, my 3 goals were flavor, tradition, and sustainability, right? Mm-hmm. How can we create amazing flavor in all of our beef products? How can we keep tradition alive while still, looking to the future and engaging technologies to make us as efficient as possible, but not forgetting that sometimes the older ways are the better ways. It's a lot easier to move cattle on horseback for them, especially stress-wise, than it is to go out on your four-wheeler and rip around. Yeah. Just a fact. And 3, sustainability, obviously you have to have the right practices. You have to understand the land that you're on. There's a local ranch by me that likes to hire people that have never been in our part of the world to come in and manage it. And they like to bring cows from not that part of the world to come and live there. And they're always baffled when stuff just doesn't work out. They just don't get it, because it should just be like it is in the Dakotas or in North Texas and everything else, right? Because those places are similar. But we live in an area that is just beyond diverse when it comes to elevation, topography, ecosystems, and the rate of change, right? I've seen it go from 90 degrees in the summertime to 39 in a matter of an hour, and then back to 90 degrees after it hailed for an hour. Yeah, right? In the middle of July. Yeah. But that's just what happens when you live at 7,000 feet and you have 10,000 and some peaks next to you. That's just the diversity that happens, and there's nowhere else to replicate that. Mm-hmm. So my goal was really just to create more income for my friends and my neighbors that are ranchers and whatnot by creating a market that was of higher value for their cows, right? Because right now the 4-packers control the industry. Mm-hmm. If they're going to sell a steak for $10, I guarantee you they didn't pay more than 90 cents for it.
Why are there only 4 packers who control the entire industry?
I hate to say you'd have to ask the government on this one, but I guess that's the only place to send you.
We talked about this a little bit before, and I mean, don't you think the USDA has too strict regulations on what a meat packing, what a slaughterhouse has to have to be USDA certified?
Yes and no. Yes, just because I know the people that I work with would still maintain high standards across the board. But the moment you let those kinds of standards slip is the moment that somebody comes in on the sly, or an employee slips and they go, well, we're still meeting regs, so it's fine. And they don't hold everybody accountable, right? And sometimes they may not do that on purpose. They may do it just because they're super busy, or maybe they are lazy and they're willing to let stuff go. But I've been to a lot of packing houses, and in the state of Utah especially, and a lot of them you walk in the front door and you can just smell death. It just hits you like a wall. And there's not another way to describe it, right? It's just fresh cut meat. It's fats. Mm-hmm. It's curdled blood a little bit here and there.
Well, the
refrigeration.
The way that cattle have to be slaughtered, when you're talking about slaughtering 1,000 cattle in a day, of course they need extremely.
Oh, and some of those big packing houses. But some of those big packing houses are killing 1,500 to 2,000, 2,500 a day.
Yeah, and of course you need that if you're doing that sort of numbers. But if you're, I go back to Joel Salatin. You could slaughter an animal like you kill a elk on the side of the mountain, mm-hmm. and you can butcher an elk and have it be clean and done in a manner so that the
I may be fine with my methods. You may not be fine with my methods. Right?
Yeah.
This all goes back to The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair in, Chicago. And that was when the meat packing industry had no standards other than the unions.
Yeah. And I'm not saying we don't need standards, just
crazy.
But it's like if somebody's buying a product where somebody is slaughtering 5 cattle in every 3 months, I would think that they could agree to a different standard than if mm-hmm. they're slaughtering 2,000 in a day. Mm-hmm. And that would make a pretty big difference on the industry, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but I think, the USDA does a really good job of working with all the local Department of Ags, in terms of Pennsylvania's Department of Ag, Utah's Department of Ag, Arizona's Department of Ag, and making sure that they're not just having federal employees go out and check. They sub that stuff out to those local departments. So it's not like we have federal employees who are employed just for that. There are some across the board, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, it's subbed out to the local departments, to each state's department. And so you're creating more state jobs that are federally funded by there for them to go and do. Now, once again, I'm not for big government or, government involved in much. But to keep some sort of oversight and to make sure that everybody's checking the boxes, everybody's doing their logs, and that kind of stuff is right. A lot of times when I hear people complain about problems or anything like that, the answer isn't, let's complain about it. The answer should be, what should I be doing better? What can I do better? And if it's not what I can do better, what system can I make better? What strategy can I make better? Is there a better way to do this entirely, right? There's 20 different ways to skin a cat. You may like yours for your reason, but I may like mine for mine. And hopefully nobody's going out and going to skin a cat over this. But that being said, if there's a problem that you see across the board in an industry, instead of a bunch of people getting together and saying, poor, pitiful me, in my opinion, they should be getting together and going, how can we become more efficient? Or how can we become better so that we exceed the standard all the time with less labor and whatnot? Look at what McDonald's and Burger King and stuff has done in response to the $15 minimum wage in Seattle, right? Everybody goes, well, that's not a livable wage. Minimum wage isn't a livable wage, which it's not, right? And so we need to make this minimum wage as that. Well, if that's the case, then your Big Mac or your meal number 3 from whatever your favorite place to go to is when you want to have your dirty little snack is going to go from $8.99 like it is today to $12.99 tomorrow. And everybody's going to go, what the heck about that? But no one's going to say, what the heck about the $15 an hour change, right? And what the business's response is going to be is, we don't want to lose response from our customers. We want to make sure we can maintain and continue to have profit growth and whatnot. So we need to take the money that we're going to lose in that wage change and get together with some of the other big people and co-invest into automation research and strategies. And that's exactly what they've done. So instead of making $15 an hour a minimum, a livable wage, there's not going to be 2 people in there that make that. Because everything else is going to be automated.
They put the burgers in some kind of like a Rube Goldberg device where it's basically just taken through and the flame broil is actually happening on a conveyor belt. That's something you got to see.
Same thing happened in the auto industry, right? That's why so many of the jobs were replaced in the auto industry. One, the standards of fit and finish to the consumer they got more educated, right? You see it happening in the food industry and food trends today too. People are more educated about food today than they were 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, right? Whether it comes to technique or style or trends or, general recipes and whatnot. And that's because more restaurants came out that were doing specialty stuff, who marketed themselves really well, and they've done really good at the one thing that everybody else has failed, which is educating the public about why this is this much and this isn't. Right?
I mean, going back to that consumer consciousness, do you think that if more consumers were educated, and I say this with a caveat, if you're a low income wage earner and you need to feed your family, go shop at Walmart all day long. Nobody should guilt trip you for doing that. But if you can afford to pay a little bit more for sustainably produced agriculture that's organic, that is going to help support the local economies of cities throughout Utah, do you think that's going to be a big driving factor to improving the local economy and local agriculture in Utah?
I'm really scared about a couple things. So there's a project in Montana, I believe, Montana or Wyoming, could be both, called the Pure or the Prairie Project or something like that. I want to say Pure Prairie League Companion, but that's a band from the 70s. Anyway, what they're doing is they've been going through and they've been buying up federal grazing rights, ranches coming for sale, all contiguous pieces, because they want to create the largest, in a sense, private national park in the country, right? Want to follow the national park model, but make it more of a conservation area rather than just a park. So they want to create a free-roaming buffalo herd again up there. They want to have, X amount of acres. I think their goal is something like 5 million acres or something like that. A lot of private equity money's in there. A lot of people from the cities and stuff put money in there. And a lot of people have an issue with that. Out of all the things I have an issue with, I have a bigger issue against somebody who's lobbying against grazing rights than somebody who's gone and bought them. Right? Because the answer to me is they're not making those grazing rights not exist anymore. They're not gone forever. They're just holding them for here. Now, they may be able to maintain them for an exponential amount of time. But I think we're going to see stuff like that happen.
So you'll be able to have free-range buffalo. And
they're going to allow hunting on them, too, though, which is going to be kind of interesting.
That's kind of what I could imagine with the way things are going. More and more people are coming to Utah to take advantage of the privately owned ranches that open up hunting.
Yep.
And one of the most famous people that recently came is Joe Rogan. He came and bagged. He talks about Utah all the time on his podcast and how amazing it is because you have massive herds of elk who are crying out. Like you go in the middle of the 5 o'clock in the morning, you hear them, and they're doing their original mating calls, which are so loud and incredible to witness and listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And with how popular he is and how popular archery is becoming and killing your own animal and basically being able to say, this is a grass-fed animal, it was a wild animal, lived every day of its life to its fullest extent. I kind of think that model of like opening up more former grazing land to wildlife and people coming in and killing their own meat might become really popular. And you think that's what's happening in Montana? Is that what it looks like?
Well, I think that's what's happening because you have a younger generation, and I'll kind of get back to where you just went right there, but you have a younger generation who doesn't want to take over the farm. Okay? They don't want to inherit debt. They've already left home when they were 18. They've got a good paying job. They're now in their late 20s, early 30s. Mom and dad are either retiring or have passed away, unfortunately. And their answer is, why? Right? This land is worth this much money. I can have a retirement right now in the bank and be set for life. Yeah. Right? I can still maintain my job, but if something ever happens, I now have my safety net. I'm taken care of. Right? Mm-hmm. And so they go ahead and they cash out. And so you see a project like that, what's happening in Montana, where they're buying up those properties, and in my opinion, better them than a housing development, or better them than, one of these uber environmentalist groups who worry about every blade of grass, and maybe this one has feelings too.
Yeah, or drilling or mining or something.
Or something like that. And just want to make something inaccessible. But the real solution needs to be, how do we engage youth in agricultural models that are profitable and make them want to either stay at home, or when that time comes and mom and dad can't take care of the farm anymore, and most likely that means they're also letting go of control of the farm, because probably dad's a little bit of a control freak. I know I have a couple of friends who are definitely that way with their kids. They want to come home and actually give something a shot, rather than just go, ooh, it's worth this much money, I'm just going to sell it. Because then you're going to have more projects like that come about. And while I may think that one's cool, I would probably have a different perspective if I lived right there, right? From an outsider's point of view, from Montana in that area, I think it's a neat project, right? Because to me, Montana and Wyoming will always be Yellowstone National Park and, the Tetons, et cetera. But there's also amazing hunting and stuff like that up there as well, obviously. But that's just what I think of referenced when it comes to those states. So really, how do we keep people involved in ag? I mean, you had a guy from the Department of Ag who had a fruit operation in here, and he was talking about kids selling out their properties, in places like American Fork and stuff like that.
I don't see how 80% of the farms left in Utah don't get sold out because people just have too big of a price tag that they could get for the land. I mean, if I'm a kid and I watched my dad slave away his whole life on a tractor and dealing with bags of fertilizer, trying to eke out a living, growing corn or growing grain, of course you're going to try.
You've got to love the lifestyle. That's just a
Yeah.
fact. You've got to love the lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
You've got to mind not waking up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at midnight and doing it again, right? You've got to love, being outdoors all day long. You've got to love dealing with the elements. You've got to love being nasty to the point where
Well,
nobody
man, I
wants to
think
touch
a
it.
ranch would be so much more enjoyable than a factory farm.
Oh, well, for sure. Well, in my opinion, the long-term trend of the meat industry, especially when you see the faux meat industry gaining so much ground, I think right now is something like a $5 billion industry, or no, $3.5 billion
Yeah,
is
it's
what I heard the other
amazing.
day. And they estimate that in 5 years it'll be 18 to $20 billion,
Are
right?
you afraid of that?
No, right?
No. Because faux meat, I mean, I tried it, but Beyond Meat, it's pretty damn good. I got a Beyond Meat Whopper, and then I tried Beyond Meat Del Taco, and I usually won't eat at taco from Taco Time, or because I've had some bad experiences, which I won't go into. But you don't think that's gonna lower the price of meat?
Well, after that topic, I think I'm done here. No, I'm just kidding. I think you're going to have different demographics that want what they want. But when it comes to the actual meat industry and what people are going to buy, your consumers already more educated than they've ever been before, right?
Yeah.
Probably comparable to the shift that happens in the the 20s or the 30s when the jungle came out, about what was happening in the packing plants and stuff, and people going, maybe I'm not going to eat my Vienna sausages today because that might be someone's real finger. But that doesn't happen today for anybody who just heard that and doesn't have the context. I think the future will be people that engage with agricultural products, whether that be meats, vegetables, fruits, etc., that have a story, a background, and things that people can touch, feel, see, and hear that they know is real. Because the Hound of the Baskervilles is coming to get us.
Sorry, this is going crazy.
Because from there, people know and are against factory farming, right?
Yeah.
They don't always know why. Okay, they just
They're all
don't know.
for organic, but they don't always know why.
Yeah, well. Yeah. Anyway, so from that point of view, agriculture's done a really crappy job about educating the public. Always have, in my opinion. They've done a fair job at reacting to things that people publish, right? But they're always in a constant state of reactiveness when it comes to leaking information or trying to inform people about our industry, right? You have a lot of agritourism things, like, you have the big Corn Bellies project, or event, not project, but event that occurred down in Lehigh, right, every year, where it's this big kind of corn maze, tractors. I mean, you get to see a bunch of more city kids, for lack of a better term, go out and engage with things that they never see, right, or can never touch and feel and turn the wheel of a tractor or whatever else, or see chickens up close and whatnot. And that's a great educational piece, because now it's just not this thing on TV. They can see it, touch it, feel it, right? But at the same time, they don't understand what it means to take care of those things. They don't understand what it means when it's 10 degrees below zero to go out and feed your cows or your horses or whatever you have, or you've got your truck stuck in the snowdrift you didn't see, and now you're going to spend the rest of your Saturday digging it out, because without it, you're not going home or feeding again that afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough existence.
But once again, it can be prevented, right? If you know there's a place that has a snowdrift, you can build a makeshift snow fence and put it up, right? Hope that it works.
Yeah.
But it's a trial and error kind of lifestyle.
But I love actually the idea of agritourism, because there are so many people who have no clue, especially kids, how food is produced. And if they actually can go and see it, I think that's the beginning of a meaningful education. Like, for example, I went to the biggest dairy in Utah, and then I followed that up by going to the smallest dairy in Utah, and I saw the two different models. And Bateman's Dairy is in Mosita, Utah, which is on the other side of Utah Lake, and it got an award for being the cleanest. Joey, come on. So it got an award for being one of the cleanest, biggest operations that has been established. But man, the cows' udders are dragging almost on the ground. These cows have been like bred to the point where they can produce 80 pounds of milk a day, but the cows are just freaking, they look like mutated forms of how cows should look. And I think every kid should go see that. I mean, do you think our food system would be in better shape if more kids knew how food is actually produced?
You ever heard the term, don't go see how the sausage is made?
Yeah, don't go see how milk is produced.
Don't go see how milk is made.
I tried to put
I don't
that
drink milk
positive
just because
spin on
I
it.
don't like milk. I never have.
Yeah.
I eat cheese.
And
I'll
all
eat a block of
respect to
cheese,
Bateman's
though.
Dairy. Those folks are awesome. I loved working with them. They produce an amazing they have an amazing dairy ranch. Hey, Joey, come on. Joey's just like, he's out of control. But I love those folks, and they were super nice, and they're one of the last major, huge milk producers in Utah. And they have to do what they have to do because everybody wants to buy that $3 gallon of milk. If you're buying that gallon of milk in Walmart or wherever you buy it, you got to see and know a little bit about how it's being produced.
I was just at a Box Elder Business Summit a couple weeks ago, and Kerry Gibson, the commissioner of the Department of Ag, was the keynote speaker, and he gave an interesting point, and that was his family is a dairy farming family up in Weber County, and he said the price that they get today for a gallon of milk versus the price they got, I think he said in the 1960s, was a difference of like 20 cents.
Wow.
Right? Mm-hmm. But yet the consumer will complain when a gallon of milk goes from $2.85 to $2.95.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, rather than blame the consumer for being, a complainer, let's talk to the consumer about what goes into this. What are you really paying for? Mm-hmm. Why is somebody willing to pay $200,000 for an Aston Martin or a Lamborghini when you could go buy a car that's going to perform just as well right now from Dodge or Chevrolet, right? Mm-hmm. And the answer is because people want to know and appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into them. When you go click on, you pull up one of their websites right now, I'll guarantee you, I'll put money on it, that there's a video that shows the handcrafted process of how they build those cars. How every stitch in an Aston Martin's interior is done by hand, right? And hand selected. And there's somebody who's paid just for that, right? And they probably make more than you, me, or the editor, makes in a year just to stitch fabric in an interior of maybe 7 or 8 cars a year, right? But at the end of the day, it is the story and knowing the exclusivity of the product and the quality of the craftsmanship. That still matters to people. In a world where we know that everything's going to break, craftsmanship and the quality of it still matters to people. And maybe it doesn't matter to some, but it's always going to matter to a niche group of people that know that maybe something with a tag that says made in America is going to last versus something that says made in China, which you're going to throw away in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Just know basically how something you are buying is being produced. That would have a major impact on the things we buy at the store. Because
sure,
I saw it the same when we did our farm issue. We focused on dairy. I did a story on Redmond Farms, and they produce raw milk, and that's their niche. And you go pay $10 a gallon for raw milk that hasn't been pasteurized or homogenized, and you got to sign a waiver to be able to buy it in Utah. And those cows are on pastures. They're milked once every 24 hours as opposed to once, I believe, every 12 hours. They're Jersey cows rather than Holsteins. And Jersey cows have way more butterfat content. And so the big advantage to the raw milk movement was that the lactase is what enables you to digest lactose. And if you buy pasteurized milk, the lactase is taken out. And so that's why we have so many people who are lactose intolerant. Because then
explain to me gluten-free.
Gluten.
Just kidding. I don't really want to know. I don't really care.
You don't want to know. But anyway, the point is, it's like if we all just knew a little bit more about how our food was produced, and it's my call to action, and it's why we produce our farm issue every year. Just teach your kids about how things are produced. You're gonna make choices like Paizlee's over that
Jack Link's or something.
Yeah, or the $3 bargain basement deal at Walmart or Savers or whatever you're able to get for ground beef.
Yeah. Well, I think the bigger thing needs to start from the grocery aspect of it, right? So the main area that people are going to interact with local products is going to be in their grocery store, right? Some of them may go to a farmer's market, but even on a farmer's market that's super busy, you're barely touching the populace of that area, right? Especially a continuous touch.
Yeah.
So how do you do a better job of educating people at the grocery stores? And that's going to require some of the people in some of these higher end grocery chains, maybe like Harmon's, maybe like Whole Foods. I feel like they've done a decent job to help educate people in the aisle about what the difference is versus not. How do you help educate people and still have the options if they want it? But how do you help educate people about your local product in this segment, and what makes them different and why? And at the end of the day, no big company like a Jack Link's or a Pepsi is going to compete with a family-owned soda bottling company or soda company that's in Utah and fifth generation and everything else like that. They just won't have the same story. Like, sure, they can put bigger production value into it and show the Pepsi going down the line and everybody that they touches and say we're all family. That's great. But at the end of the day, does that support your local economy? Does that put money in your school's coffer? Does that put better products in your school's lunch?
Yeah.
The answer is no. But you also have a bad view when it comes to those kinds of things because you have the school lunch programs that the feds decided to put in, right? If you can name me a kid that goes to school and go, I can't wait for school lunch, right? I'd be happy to hear it, but I never hear about it, right? All the people who have kids that I know or the kids that I know, they all go like, oh, no. We go to the store at lunch and we go buy a bag of your jerky and go back to school because and we're still hungry, but it's better than anything else that they're ever going to feed us in there, et cetera. And so they want to be able, they just don't listen because they don't care, right? They just want to have the stats on the board and be able to check out and, the constituents going on to the next topic.
Well, you're seeing some big changes. Like Harmon's was the first, I think, to start it where it says like something like I'm a local, and then you got a story of some local producer there. And now I think Whole Foods got on that bandwagon. Maybe it was Whole Foods first and then Harmon's. But now all the grocery stores are trying to copy that model, saying, we carry this much local produce and we support local Utah and everything like that.
It's not enough, though, in my opinion.
Yeah,
it's not enough.
I think they kind of.
And the answer is a little tag in the aisle is not enough. A little tag in the aisle is not enough. I'm a believer that we communicate more on a picture and image basis more than any time in our history. Hence why we're filming this podcast right now versus just having it in audio, because it's one more medium that people will listen to or watch, and you can also get different things conveyed from seeing a person's facial emotions or anything else than you can just talking to somebody. I mean, I know everybody listening to this and anybody that I can probably talk to has sent a text where someone goes, what did you mean by that? And you're like, whoa, I just said good job. And they're like, oh, you didn't mean good job? Right? Different. I mean, same words, totally different context.
I'm going to get in trouble by criticizing factory farm dairy because it's just the norm. But still, I mean, it is what it is, and why lie about it?
Well, at the end of the day, like I said, I think the trend of what will continue into the future as the consumer gets more educated or more miseducated about big ag, because there's a lot of big ag people that run very good operations.
Yeah,
I know lots of people who run. I know lots of people that run feedlots. That those are probably the healthiest cows in there all the time.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever sick. Now, do they have like a glorious life? Are they going out to the pastures, every day or running up around on the mountain? No, right? But they're never hungry, which is more than we can say for our own population, right? They're constantly in a consistent state of food bliss. And there's definitely some that feed them stuff that's horrific and pump them full of steroids and other stuff. I mean, those stigmas that are out there are true, and they do exist places. But there's also a huge group of people that are demonized by that don't deserve to be.
Yeah.
And if that's what your choice is, that you don't want to support that, then that's fine. Then buy a product like mine over, the Walmart beef. But understand, if I mark something $5 and their competitive product is going to be $1.89, I don't have 6 middlemen that I'm giving that money to. And I could go ahead and create a bigger profit margin there for me, but I don't. I give that mostly back to my producers. Because I want them to come to me whenever they have an animal that they want to sell and call me and say, hey, we'd like to be able to do this. Because I want to see my friends be successful. And if they're successful, then in turn, I'm going to be successful, right? That's the way community was always meant to work.
Yeah, find a legitimate win-win for
Find a legitimate win-win. There's
for
no
you
reason to
and
have
who
an
you do
angle
business
about it.
with, and
There's no reason to go ahead and do X, Y, or Z. If I could go ahead and build a company today in today's competitive environment, I would go ahead and I would have my own cows and my own cow herd and everything else and be right there doing it. But why take the thunder away from my friends who are already established and that's their real living, and have me be successful and end up, maybe trying to expand and buy up something that they're interested in, because now all of a sudden I have the capital too and maybe they don't. Why not go ahead, instead of me having all the gains, go ahead and spread that around my community from all the people who decide, hey, we want to work with you, or we've known you for a long time. I think this is great what you're doing. Because I'll tell you one thing, when I told my friends I was going to do a grass-fed beef thing, they all said, grass-fed beef, that's the biggest gimmick there is. Half the stuff out there isn't really grass-fed. It's only grass-fed for 30 days. And that's true. A lot of the big packing houses do that kind of stuff because technically to market as grass-fed, you only have to be grass-fed for 30 days.
no kidding, really? God, that is a scam.
And grass-finished versus grass-fed is not a term, according
really?
to the USDA, right? Just grass-fed is
There's no
it.
distinction.
There's no distinction. There is in the consumer markets because people started realizing, hey, some of these people are doing it, so they started asking, are you grass-finished as well? And, our response is always they're grass-fed and finished from day 1 to day 0, because it's better than sounding, from the day they're born to the day, they turn into hamburger or your steaks or whatever. So there's no reason to beat around the bush with labeling, but the USDA loopholes have been famous for that for big companies and whatnot. But after we've gone down that rabbit hole, back to the future of factory farms and stuff, and what consumers can do to change things. It's all about how you want to engage with people, in your grocery store, because that's your daily engagement or your weekly engagement with your local farmer or not. Choose to maybe spend that extra $1 to $2 on a product that you're going to use. And I guarantee, these people like me sell stuff that are not in the grocery store on their online stores or, whatever, and you're going to find better prices on there anyway, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to offer you bulk deals, et cetera, because at the end of the day, they care about just maintaining a cash flow revenue model because they're in uncharted waters. And this will continue to be the future, in my opinion. You see it across the country and everywhere else. And the people that have, the story, the good branding, and, consistently good product and presence are really the people that continue to shine. And you're always going to have your small niche ones. But I think it'll really grow. I think we'll see the big factory farm meats slowly edge out, and those will be the people who lose the market capital to the faux meat segments and everything else, because those are the people who are making that switch anyway.
Yeah.
And then the people who go on faux meat and go, man, I really just want a steak, right? This bean fluff steak just isn't cutting it for me. I don't care how real they say it is. And they finally go back and they make that choice. They're not going to go back and buy the $2.99 steak from Walmart.
Yeah.
They're going to go buy a grass-fed steak or, whatever the trend is going to be at that time period. And that's really what they're going to care about. They want to make sure that their dollar go ahead and support something that they believe in, not just going to go to something that they're against.
Yeah, and I think it can make a huge difference. I think especially maybe Utah's not the right state for intensive grazing management, and in some places I think it is. I mean, I know like Altamont and areas where there's a way you can irrigate the grass to the point where it's really abundant and the biodiversity of the pasture is to the point where it can handle. But most of Utah, I guess we probably can't do much grass intensive grazing meat. But I know that any person who believes that veganism is the answer, if you don't understand how grass finished beef works and how intensive grazing grass finished beef works, and you don't understand how regenerative agriculture works, look into it and understand it, because cow farts are not causing global warming. Well,
first of all, it's never the cow farts that produce the methane. They produce a small amount of methane, but the piece of methane that's really produced in any volume is going to be when they chew their cud, right? Because a cow has 4 stomachs, and so they initially eat the grass. It goes into the first stomach, and then they basically regurgitate it into their mouth and chew it again.
Yeah,
and that's when the methane is coming,
right?
pretty much. and that's where the methane's really coming from. So when anybody says to you it's all the cow farts, once again, agriculture sucks at getting in front of the ball of messaging. They suck at it. They just always have. With the exception of beef, it's what's for dinner, which everyone remembers, right?
Yeah.
Mostly because it's Sam Elliott. But otherwise, when it comes to educating the public about agriculture and how it all works, they're just not great at it.
Who's Sam Elliott?
Who's Sam Elliott? Uh-huh. Really, you don't know who Sam Elliott is? The famous voice actor, and he's been an actor forever.
Yeah,
the guy with the huge mustache,
okay,
right?
that's the guy who was the voice behind Beef.
Yeah.
That's what's for dinner. Okay, all right. Yeah, well, cool. Well, it's something I really believe in, and I think it could. If we treated our beef like we treat our craft beer, and we start buying more like craft beef and know where the beef's coming from, how it's being raised, we did the same with our dairy. I think we could dramatically change rural economies throughout Utah and give way more opportunities to ranchers and farmers. And that's kind of what I've learned in producing 8 farm issues now of Utah Stories magazine, and we'll put links to a bunch of the farm stories in the show notes, and we'll put links to your website. And
that'd be great.
Is it Paizlees.com?
Paizlees, Paizlees.com. We offer free delivery anywhere in the state of Utah, and right now we have a 20% off sale on all fresh meats.
Awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Benjaman, thanks for being on the program.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on the Utah Stories Show. If you'd like to be a bigger part of the program, go visit utahstories.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Another way you can be a part of it is you can join us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Those are our 3 social media platforms. We're way more actively involved in YouTube and Instagram than we are any other platforms. And just so you know a little bit about this program, we're into preserving the quality of life we enjoy here in Utah. That pretty much encompasses all of our guests on the program. If that's something you're into as well, then I hope you join us and recommend guests, recommend topics, come with your questions. We're live streaming our episodes every Tuesday at 1:30 on YouTube, so you can join us live. And thanks for being a part of the program. Until next time, this is Richard Markosian signing out.